Well, it's the afternoon of day 3, and I don't think I could have picked a harder topic if I ever tried in my whole life. So I finished the framework for the outline, and we're going to look at that in just a second. And there are a couple things that I'm going to have to prove in order to write this essay, and of course they are so hard because, again, here's what's going to happen. This is groundbreaking because there is no way to find some of the information that I need to find, such as the demographics of the people who attended Woodstock. Where did they come from? Well, I knew about it. I remember asking my mother if I could go, and she said, well, you can either do that or this, and the other thing sounded better, and I just didn't have any friends that were really going to gear up and go, and so forth. So, but I knew about it, and so that means that it's just going to take some more digging, which will still be fun. So let's look at this outline real quick. As I was telling you before, and I think we've already gone over this part here, but I had read this book, The Tipping Point, and I thought that that was a good place to go, and it did give a nice structure. So I have completed just the outline for the definition section, which is what am I going to have to tell the audience in order for my reader, in order for them to know what I'm proving. And then we have the signs of the time and the unrest and so forth. And I think we looked at that already. And then the marketing, which is still a question, but I'm going to find the answer to it because now they're in New York, but they're getting bands from California. And so that creates a little arc there of connectivity. So I don't know. I have to work on that. Ugh. Then we have that first law of the few. And so I studied the 4 promoters of the festival, and I placed those people in the slot where they would belong: the connector, the maven, and the salespeople. So the connector, who knew everybody, was Michael Lang, who didn't know very many people, but he lived in Woodstock. Bob Dylan was living up there, and it was a popular place for musicians to go and produce music. You know, those rural atmospheres provided really interesting locations for creators. And I mean, the music, oh my gosh, the music that was created during that time period. And I had forgotten all that was going on. I mean, oh, goodness gracious. So Michael Lang had this dream. And his dream was actually to build a studio, a recording studio, in upstate New York. And he had actually had some experience with the Miami Pop Festival in 1968 that had like 28,000 people. So he kind of had this idea of maybe having a little concert series and getting the money to build a facility. And some other events were happening at the same time, little gatherings called sound outs that were held on farm acreages in upstate New York, where all these creative people were located. Well, here's the thing. Also, creative people were organizing in Los Angeles as well. I don't know if you watched that film about Laurel Canyon, and it's very, very fascinating to me. So New York isn't the only place where that was. Could I just spell this word right? Just a minute. Okay. So, this we know. And so he has this idea of connecting, bands to come together. So that's why I placed him in the position of the connector. And then the maven is the person who's always connected to ways to help, ways to make things happen. You have like the dreamer, and then you have the person that's like, churns up the wheels to make it happen. And that was Artie Kornfeld, who had become an A&R executive at Capitol Records, again, in Los Angeles. And he and Michael became fast friends. They had lots of these grand ideas. Remember, the whole world is upside down at this time, and riots and protests and the war, everything was going on. So these people have this idea. So Artie introduces Michael to his lawyer and his lawyer's friend to help fund the project, and that was John Roberts and Joel Rosenman. So the four of them together, off they go to create this concert. So this, we know, is how the group set up to make this happen. I know. Okay. Now, the stickiness factor. This is the part that part's easy. The law of the few, that's going to be easy. Easy. Now we come up to the hard to prove, and that is the factor of cool. And that's this sort of counterculture of hippies, the hippie movement. And that, the backbone of that's going to have to be important in this, because there are no statistics. There wasn't anybody keeping track of anything. So we have to figure out how this came to be. There were 500,000 people, or 600,000 people actually at the concert, and then 1 million people outside the fences, and then another 1 million people on the highway trying to get to the festival. And then in upstate New York, there were another 5 to 7 million people trying to come down that way to get to the festival. That is a lot of activity. So it just seems overwhelming. I don't know how I'm going to prove this. And the motivating factor, I'm thinking, is the power of cool, because that was a time period where the counterculture just was so cool in spite of all that was going on. So there's that. The packaging and marketing, which, I'm going to have to work on that. And then one of the factors is experiments. And of course, that would be the few concerts that they'd been involved in with Monterey. There were a lot of little concerts going on, but they were small but still cool. And then the back to the temperature of the power of context, I think, is we kind of laid out already up in here in the section 2, which is the signs of the time. So I don't need to repeat the signs of the time, but when I'm looking at the signs of the time and studying that some more, I'm going to want to add some of that information to this section. Right, that way I'm not repeating things that I've already said. I'm adding new information that will come down here to really set up the context for this event. And then 6 is the unexpected cataclysmic success of the Nelson Florence, blah, blah, blah. And so we say, well, so what? So I prove my theory about how this happened. Let's say 5 million, 1 million, 7, like 8 million people are involved in this. Overwhelming. So I'm going to make my points about that I've proved already up here in this section, which is it was cool. And now I'm going to talk about how cool translated into numbers of people who got up off the couch. And then in what ways was this a calamity? It's easy to prove. It was declared a disaster, whatever. Then anthropological terms. This is something that I'm challenged by, but I'm not going to be stopped by. And that is the whole study of mankind. Why people do what they do. How something gets to the tipping point, but then gets people off their couches and out into the streets. So, this is what Rosenberg had said. We had an event that challenged people's concept of community, and they responded to that challenge over that weekend by essentially recreating a society that was in danger of falling apart. That's a pretty strong beacon, and I guess that beacon continues to shine on some of the darker moments in subsequent years. What a beautiful thing to say. So, I'll look at that and I'll, talk about it in the greater context. But then I thought about this really interesting point that I want to that I'm going to be answering, and that is that festival a possible precursor to the Women's March, the March on Our Lives, where no violence happened? All those kids went out into the streets mad and upset and marching for their lives, literally, and nobody got hurt. The Women's March after the election took to the streets, and nobody got hurt. And I think maybe that's, of course, all speculation, but I'll find some people who to talk to about that. And then the conclusion, I never leave the outline phase, the bone structure, as I call it, without putting some stuff in the conclusion. It just helps me to not be overwhelmed. It helps me to come in and say, okay, I've already got some stuff for the conclusion. Because that's the part that's the hardest for everybody, I think. Well, I'm certainly going to say for myself. Okay, so an unlikely legacy, that's going to be part of the conclusion. This will be toned down. I don't need this long of a quote. This is one of the bands that performed at the festival. And it doesn't need to be this long to make the point, but I put the whole thing in there, so now. And then the power of love. I'm not sure that this is going to happen, but it's there. And then C will be final outcomes. And I'll either end it with this picture, or I may end it with some of the marches that have happened in later years that managed to be peaceful. And I also found an article that trashed Woodstock. So we have the opposition there. The people that said it was just a disaster. It was just, but those people, I'm going to find out who wrote that article, right? Because somebody that goes on and goes, oh, it was terrible, it was awful, it was a disaster, it was a muddy. Why do you care? Well, maybe they were one of the people that wanted to. I don't know. I will find out. And a couple of other things I need to find out. Of course, I put in yellow. I highlight what I need to see, what I need to research. And I put a green highlight where an image needs to be. And that keeps me from loading it up with too many images. And it lets me know. Of course, this will just be the protest, because that's the point that I'm making here about the cultural events. And I think that this was a major cultural event, but I'll have to see on that. So I've got some quotes and things that I've put in, and I've still got a lot of questions left to answer. And I now need to take a break from this, because what I enjoy about theories is that I always think, oh, piece of cake. This is going to be so easy. Why did everybody go to the festival? Because it was cool. Well, you know what? It's cool to get a neat pair of shoes, but that doesn't mean I'm going to sit on a highway with 5 million people trying to get to a concert. And, that becomes an epidemic. You always think epidemic is something terrible, but it's not. It means it's just people lose all reason. And why would you stay stuck on a highway knowing that you were going to have a hard time getting to the festival? And I knew about it in the summer after we graduated. So anyway, I have to look into that and talk to some people I graduated high school with, see, did we know this? And but then I come upon the things that are going to be tough to prove. And I can say that the whole thing was the power of cool, but now I've got to define, what do I mean by cool? What was it to be cool? And why would cool translate into getting into an automobile and heading up to upstate New York to a concert that is probably going to be impossible to get to? I don't know. I'll work on it. And it gives us a place to go, and I've got a possibility for my conclusion, my image that will be in my conclusion. I don't know. I'm not married to it. It'll be somewhere. But it was an iconic moment. So there we go, folks. That ends the outline process. And now from here, I start going through this outline, and I will put in yellow the things that I need to find answers to, like this. And that's just the basic information that will be pretty easy to find. I need to define what a concert promoter is. I'm not going to put the names of the guys right here. This is actually a definition. This won't take long at all. I just have to go ask Google what is a concert promoter, and I'll find out. So this is going to be easy. I can easily, I think, find out how many concerts that are an idea actually happen. And I have a friend that's in that industry, so I can ask that. I already know this one, so I don't need to highlight it. And I already know this one, so I just have to fill it in, but thank goodness I already know. So, and then there's this answer to this question: what would have been a logical venue for the site for this concert? When you consider the context that they had been, or some people had been effectively holding little festivals in little farm communities and, you know, making a little bit of cash, then it makes sense, you know, that, of course, let's have it in the open spaces. Now, New York, I don't know. I don't know why it wouldn't be the middle of the country where you could get land for cheap and have everybody more easily able to. I don't know. That one I'm to figure that one out. But I didn't plan this, so, you know, it's just not my my thing. So here we go. That leaves us off, and we'll take it from here. And I am going to take 2 days off from this because otherwise I will frustrate myself and I will not enjoy the process. And I have started this process plenty early. I have given myself lots of time to write this essay because I started on the day the module opened. That's when I started. So I even actually started when I locked down the topic because that's when I probably would have opened the folder and popped in a few images and gotten some interesting facts just to see if I really wanted to do that topic. So that lets us know what we've got to do. We are in a theory essay, and it's never going to be easy, and we'll get back to it next week. That concludes this tutorial, and that concludes our section on outlining.